Hello everyone, welcome back. What you are about to hear will permanently change how you engage with the narcissist in your life. Not because it teaches you to fight harder, but because it reveals something the narcissist never wanted you to discover, that your anger, deployed correctly, is the single most destabilizing force their psychology has ever encountered. Stay with every word, because this changes everything. Everyone told you to stay calm, to be the bigger person, to never let them see you react. And that advice, well-intentioned, widely repeated, almost universally given, was missing one critical psychological truth. There is a specific kind of anger, a specific quality of fury, that does not feed the narcissist, that does not give them what they want, that destroys them from the inside out. Today, we identify it with complete precision. You have felt it before. That moment when the grief finally burned away and what was left underneath was not sadness. It was clarity. Cold, still, absolute. The moment you stopped hurting and started seeing. That moment was not your weakness breaking under pressure. That was your most powerful psychological state finally arriving. And the narcissist, the instant they encountered that specific quality in your eyes, felt something they almost never feel. Genuine fear. Here is the haunting question at the center of everything we discuss today. Why does the narcissist, who provokes anger constantly, who feeds on emotional chaos, who weaponizes other people's reactions as supply, why does a specific quality of your anger make them retreat completely? The answer lives in the deepest architecture of narcissistic psychology. And once you understand it, you will never be weaponless in this dynamic again. The narcissist is an expert in emotional chaos, comfortable in storms they manufactured. But there is one atmospheric condition they cannot navigate, cannot redirect, cannot convert, and absolutely cannot survive. It is not your sadness, not your begging, not your explosive reactive rage. It is your controlled, clear, psychologically grounded anger. The anger that has already finished grieving. The anger that needs nothing from them. That anger is their worst nightmare. And today, you understand exactly why. To understand why your anger becomes the narcissist's nightmare, you must first understand what they actually need from you emotionally. Not love, though they perform needing it. Not respect, though they demand it. What the narcissist fundamentally requires is predictability. They need to know exactly how you will respond to each provocation. Because predictable responses are manageable responses. And manageable means controllable. The moment you become unpredictable, the moment your anger changes quality, the entire control system breaks down. The narcissist spent the early phase of the relationship mapping your emotional responses with the precision of a cartographer. Every trigger identified. Every vulnerability cataloged. Every pattern of reaction filed away as operational intelligence. Your sadness is in the playbook. Your begging is in the playbook. Your explosive reactive rage is in the playbook. But your resolved, grounded, completely clear anger, the anger that arrives after the grief is finished, that is not in the playbook. And a player encountering a move they never studied is a player in genuine, unrecoverable crisis. Here is the specific psychological mechanism that makes the narcissist's system fail. The narcissist's power depends entirely on staying one emotional step ahead, anticipating your response and converting your emotional energy into their supply. When you scream, they perform calm. When you accuse, they perform victim. When you rage reactively, they redirect. These are automatic reflexes, practiced, deeply ingrained, instantly activated. But these reflexes require reactive anger to function. Against resolved anger, anger that is still, clear, and needs nothing in return, every reflex fires into empty space. The system has no target. And a system with no target cannot operate. Resolved anger is the clinical term for what I am describing. It is anger that has already processed the grief beneath it, already integrated the betrayal, already moved through the phase of hoping things would be different. Resolved anger does not need anything from the narcissist, not their acknowledgement, not their remorse, not their understanding. It is complete in itself, self-contained, and self-contained anger in the narcissist's psychological experience, signals the one thing they dread above all else: a person who has decided with full authority that the narcissist simply does not matter enough to be wounded by anymore. The narcissist's deepest operational fear, beneath every layer of constructed superiority, is irrelevance. Not failure. Not public exposure. Irrelevance. The terror that someone has decided, with complete psychological authority, that they no longer matter. Resolved anger communicates this message with devastating precision. Not through words. Through the specific, unmistakable quality of someone who has finished grieving and arrived at the other side carrying something the narcissist cannot reach, cannot redirect, and cannot convert into supply. That communication alone dismantles years of carefully constructed power. There is also a neurological dimension worth understanding. The narcissist's nervous system is calibrated for escalation, for the emotional provocation and reaction cycle that keeps the dynamic at a heightened intensity they can navigate and control. Resolved anger does not escalate. It does not match their energy. It does not enter the heightened frequency their system is tuned to receive and redirect. It operates on a completely different frequency. And a system calibrated for one frequency, suddenly encountering another, does not adapt. It fails. Completely. Immediately. Without recovery. The turning point arrives in one specific moment. A moment the narcissist has never rehearsed for. It is the moment you look at them without flinching. Without hoping. Without the residual softness of someone who still wants them to be different. You look at them with the clear, still, completely unafraid eyes of someone who finally knows exactly what they are looking at. And in that look, that specific, devastating quality of clear-eyed recognition, the narcissist's entire performance loses its audience. The show continues. But no one is watching anymore. Their immediate response is escalation. Because escalation is the only tool available to a system encountering input it cannot process. They become louder, more extreme, more theatrical in their provocations. They reach for the triggers that previously guaranteed a reaction, the specific accusations, the strategic cruelties, the manufactured vulnerabilities that always produced the emotional response they needed. Against your resolved anger, these triggers land on something impenetrable. And escalation that produces no reaction does not just fail, it begins consuming the person escalating. The fire turns inward. Here is the plot twist that redefines the entire dynamic. The narcissist, who position themselves as powerful, controlled, and emotionally superior throughout the entire relationship, is now visibly, demonstrably reactive. While you stand still in your resolved anger, they are escalating, reaching, performing with increasing desperation for an audience that is watching with clinical detachment rather than emotional vulnerability. The roles have inverted completely, permanently, and everyone present feels the shift, even those who cannot name what they are witnessing. When escalation fails, the narcissist pivots to their most reliable secondary tool, the sudden, dramatic performance of vulnerability, manufactured remorse, theatrical recognition of what they did. This pivot was calibrated over the course of the relationship to activate your empathy and dissolve your anger. Against resolved anger, it produces something entirely different. Not compassion, not softening, recognition. You see the performance as performance. The mechanism is visible, and the seeing is written unmistakably across your face. The curtain has not just been pulled aside. It has been removed permanently. The power reversal at this turning point is not gradual. It is categorical. Power in a dynamic belongs to the person who needs the other least. Your resolved anger has just demonstrated, irrefutably, that you need nothing from them. Not their acknowledgement, not their remorse, not their change, not even their understanding. And needlessness, complete, genuine, psychologically grounded needlessness, is the most absolute form of power available in human psychology. You did not take the power from them. You simply stopped giving it away. And the moment you stopped, it returned to its rightful owner. The collapse begins in the narcissist's interior. In the psychological spaces they spend their entire lives defending against genuine examination. It begins as a crack in the internal narrative, the story they maintained where they were always justified, always the more evolved party, always ultimately right. Your resolved anger introduced something into that narrative that cannot be edited out. The truth. Witnessed. Irrevocably present. And truth, inside a psychology built entirely on self-deception, does not sit quietly. It corrodes. Slowly. Persistently. Without mercy. The first external manifestation is a change in behavioral consistency. The mask, always maintained with effort but never visibly, begins requiring more energy than depleted reserves can sustain. Colleagues notice inconsistency where there was once seamlessness. Friends encounter volatility where there was once charm. New romantic interests experience idealization compressing and devaluation arriving earlier than the standard timeline. The performance is degrading in real time. And degrading performances attract exactly the scrutiny the narcissist most needs to avoid. The smear campaign they launch, because they always launch one, begins producing unexpected results. Because a smear campaign requires a visibly destabilized target. One who responds with visible distress. Who provides, through their reaction, evidence supporting the narrative being constructed. Your resolved anger, your continued, quiet, unperturbed building of your own life, provides none of this. You are not destabilized. You are not reacting. And an undestabilized smear target is the smear campaign's worst possible outcome. The campaign turns back on the one who launched it. Here is the darkest consequence, the one that unfolds entirely in the narcissist's interior, in the unguarded moments between performances. Something surfaces that their psychology is constitutionally unprepared to process, a recognition of genuine loss. Not loss of supply. Loss of something real. Because your anger, in its resolved, clear, completely grounded form, was the most authentic thing that ever penetrated their constructed world. And they destroyed access to it. With their own hands. By being exactly what they are. That recognition is the wound no new supply can heal. The splinter too deep to reach. Permanently, quietly, devastatingly present. Here is the final truth. When you treat a narcissist with resolved anger, not reactive rage, but the clear, still, psychologically grounded anger that arrives after the grief, you do not become like them. You do not descend to their level. You rise to something they can never reach, the specific, extraordinary psychological altitude of someone who has processed their pain completely and emerged carrying only clarity. And clarity, in the narcissist's presence, is not just protection. It is devastation. The anger they feared was never your screaming, never your tears or your begging or your explosive reaction to their provocations. The anger that made them retreat, that made them recalculate and ultimately collapse, was your stillness. Your complete, unshakable, psychologically sovereign stillness inside the anger. That stillness communicated the one thing their entire operational system was designed to prevent. I am done. Not angry done. Not hurt done. Done. And nothing you do from this moment forward will change that. To every person watching this who was told their anger was the problem in the relationship, hear this now, your anger was never the problem. Your anger was the solution the narcissist spent the entire relationship trying to prevent you from accessing. They needed you to suppress it, redirect it, apologize for it, turn it inward against yourself. Because outward, directed clearly and groundedly at the actual source of the injury, your anger was the one thing their system could not metabolize, could not redirect, could not convert into supply. It was not your flaw. It was their termination notice. The difference between reactive rage and resolved anger is everything in this dynamic. Reactive rage is the narcissist's fuel. It confirms their centrality and gives them emotional chaos to navigate. Resolved anger is the narcissist's termination notice. It is the psychological announcement that the supply line has been permanently severed. Not in pain, but through pain. Through the transformation that occurs when anger has finished its grief work and arrived on the other side carrying only truth and the unshakable intention to protect itself going forward. That is not weakness. That is the completion of the most important psychological journey a survivor makes. Your anger was always trying to protect you. From the very first moment something felt wrong, before you had words for it, before you had a framework, before you could name what was being done, your anger was sending the signal. The signal that something in the dynamic was violating something essential in you. The tragedy of narcissistic relationships is not that the signal was wrong. The tragedy is that you were systematically taught to distrust it. Today, you trust it again. Today, you trust it completely. And that trust, that restored relationship with your own psychological signals, is the foundation of everything that comes next. Begin now the practice of honoring your anger as information rather than managing it as inconvenience. Anger that is consistently suppressed does not disappear. It turns inward. It becomes the depression that makes you believe you are the problem. The anxiety that keeps you perpetually off balance. The self-doubt the narcissist planted and your suppressed anger watered. Let it out. Let it be examined. Let it become what it was always trying to become, your most honest, most protective, most psychologically powerful voice. Not a weapon against others. A guardian of yourself. The narcissist will continue. Will find new targets. Will reconstruct the performance for new audiences. That is their trajectory, fixed, repetitive, incapable of the genuine evolution that would allow it to end. Your trajectory is not fixed, is not repetitive, is not constrained by the inability to grow. Your trajectory is a line extending forward, into a life shaped entirely by who you actually are. Not who the narcissist needed you to be. Not who the relationship reduced you to. But who you discovered yourself to be inside the hardest experience you ever survived. And that person, forged in that specific fire, is extraordinary. The life waiting on the other side of this anger is not a consolation prize. It is not the life you settle for because the relationship cost you the one you wanted. It is something categorically better. A life built on the bedrock of complete self-knowledge, refined perception, and the hard-won psychological sovereignty that comes from having been tested at the deepest level and discovering that you did not break. You clarified. Every experience that was designed to diminish you instead defined you. Every attempt to reduce you instead revealed you. You are not the person who survived the narcissist. You are the person the survival built. What the world needs to understand, what this video exists to establish, is that the empath is not the natural prey of the narcissist. The empath, once awakened, once angry in the resolved sense, once completely clear about what they survived and who they are on the other side of it, is the narcissist's most dangerous encounter. Not because the empath seeks to destroy, but because the empath carries the one thing the narcissist's entire constructed existence was built to avoid, the capacity to see clearly, feel completely, and speak truthfully. Without distortion. Without strategic agenda. Without needing the narcissist's agreement to make the truth real. When you treat a narcissist with resolved anger, you do not become their worst nightmare because you frighten them. You become their worst nightmare because you freed yourself. Because you demonstrated, in the most complete, irrefutable, psychologically sovereign way available, that their power over you is finished. Their tools are useless. Their performance has lost its audience. And you, the person they targeted, the person they systematically worked to diminish, the person they believed they had mapped completely and controlled permanently, you are something they never accounted for and can never contain. You are someone who finally knows exactly who they are. And that knowledge, complete, unshakable, entirely your own, is the most dangerous, most beautiful, most powerful thing a human being can ever become.